Good morning. It's a pleasure to join you today. My name is Derek Abbey, and today I'll be providing a presentation on Project Recover titled Keeping America's Promise. A little bit about myself. As I mentioned, my name is Derek Abbey. I spent a career in the Marine Corps, 23 years, and that was when I was introduced to Project Recover. At the time, I was an active duty Marine serving in a fighter squadron, and I was introduced to the founder of our organization, Dr. Scannon. He invited me to be in the group, and I immediately became passionate about the mission and have spent 18 years in the organization, first just as a member, and then becoming a mission commander of missions that we executed overseas. I grew into a role on the board of directors as our nonprofit grew, and today I'm the president and CEO of the organization, and I filled this role now for about 2.5 years. So a little bit about Project Recover. Project Recover is a collaborative effort to enlist 21st century science and technology in a quest to find and repatriate Americans missing in action since World War II in order to provide recognition and closure for families and the nation as a whole. The most important piece of that, despite all of our work, is really the focus on those missing Americans, returning them to their loved ones who have long held questions for years and providing some answers to those questions and hopefully some healing in the process. So in 1945, at the end of World War II, thousands upon thousands, after years of participating in war, celebrated the end of that conflict and returned home. But for thousands, more than 80,000 at the time, they were missing in action. And their tens of thousands, if not millions of family members at home were left with the question of what happened to their loved one. And for years and years and years, those family members across our nation have held on to those questions and held on to the void of what happened to their loved ones. They weren't allowed the opportunity really to celebrate the end of that conflict, but instead were left with answers that would haunt them for years and years to follow. People like Ora Sharninghouse, Walter Uncle Bert Mittis, and William Pennell did not return home to Ohio, Pennsylvania, or South Dakota, and their families were left with those answers or those questions of what happened to their loved one. And that, again, that would haunt them for years and years and years. So who is impacted when somebody is MIA? Well, it covers many people. Millions and millions of people in our nation right now are impacted by the loss of those loved ones. Today, there's more than 80,000 missing Americans from our previous conflicts all the way back to World War II, 72,000 of them from World War II specifically. But those that are impacted include individuals, and I'll actually combine those individuals with veterans and active duty service members. We at Project Recover believe that when you don the cloth of our nation and when you make an oath to the Constitution, that we as a nation collectively make a promise to that individual and their family that if they should fall in battle, we'll do everything that we can to return them to their loved ones. Well, the context of war prevents that from happening sometime, and today more than 80,000 service members remain missing. The people that are tasked with keeping that promise in real time are our active duty service members, those that serve alongside their brothers and sisters in arms, do everything that they can to not only protect each other and have each other's back on the battlefield, but if they should fall or become injured, ensure that they're kept with their unit and ultimately returned to their units, their nation, and their families if they should fall in battle. So those individuals are directly impacted. And then obviously the loved ones of that service member are significantly impacted. Many times people ask us, if these people have been missing for now 8 decades, does somebody really care? And the truth is they care very, very much. And that wound or that void associated with that loss is not only held on to those family members that knew that service member directly or interacted with them, but it's passed from generation to generation. Those questions and those long-held, and those not answered questions are passed from generation to generation. Many times that opportunity to heal from that loss, that grieving process is interrupted, and those families are impacted for generations to come. And we as a nation are also impacted by this loss and these missing service members. We as a collective make that promise, And we as a collective are responsibility for keeping that promise. And until it's kept, there's no expiration on it. And we're going to do everything that we can to return those service members to their loved one. One thing of note is that in our efforts in searching for, locating, and ultimately repatriating these MIAs, we've seen these impacts paralleled in the host nations that we work in. Today, I'll talk mostly about the nation of Palau, where we've done a lot of our work over the years. But the Palauans are impacted by these losses as well. They are a war-torn nation even now, 8 decades later. But they are impacted as individuals, families, and a nation as a whole in their work to support us in returning these MIAs to their loved ones. They are still healing from, or attempting to heal from, the wounds of war. And we've discovered that through their help in accomplishing this mission, they too can be impacted on the individual, family, and national level. And it's something that's really impressive and really incredible to witness firsthand. So how did all this start? In 1993, Dr. Pat Scannon, who you have an opportunity to interact with in a little bit, was on a mission to the nation of Palau. And at the time, he was working with a group that was searching for a Japanese trawler that was sunk at that time by Ensign George Herbert Walker Bush, who would obviously go on to become president of the United States. They were very successful in finding that trawler. They found it, and then found themselves with some extra time on the backside of that mission. And so Pat and his wife decided to take a little bit of time to tour around Palau, and they hired a guide. And instead of going to the regular tourist spots, the dive locations and things like that, they asked their guide to show them some of the World War II wreckage that was in the area. A lot of people are not familiar with the nation of Palau, nor do they know really what happened in that nation during World War II. But Palau was the site of 9 major air campaigns, bombing campaigns that resulted in a significant amount of loss for the Americans during the war, and also an amphibious landing that took place on the island of Palau, which is part of Palau. So there's several, or a couple hundred losses still associated with MIAs in Palau. And so when Pat and his wife took that tour, the guide took them to this B-24 wing that you can see pictured on the screen. Pat asked the guide, what happened to this airplane and what happened to the crew? And the guide didn't have answers to either one of those questions. And Pat immediately became interested in not only this airplane, but would find himself interested in several more around that, and took it upon himself to start researching the battles that took place in Palau, and also researching what happened to those that were still missing, and started doing trips as an individual back to the nation of Palau. It was shortly thereafter that he realized that this might not be the safest work to be doing as an individual. He was working in the waters around Palau and in the jungles of that nation. And so he decided to start bringing in colleagues and friends to assist him with this work. And that would become what was originally called the Bent Prop Project, and later would be called what we are called now, Project Recover. So many people might not be specifically familiar with where the nation of Palau is, but it's in the South Pacific, about 500 miles to the east of the Philippines, or about 500 miles south of Guam. You could see it represented by the star on the screen. So Pat started doing these missions, very, very difficult work, using a lot of rudimentary techniques, just basic scuba diving and searching the ocean floor using scuba, traipsing through the jungle online in groups of people to look for aircraft or evidence of aircraft. They would search and comb the archives in the national, in our nation's capital at the National Archives to support these missions. And anytime we found any evidence of a site located or that could be associated with an MIA, we would do flag ceremonies, and we would float the flag for each MIA associated with that site, and keep that flag to be delivered to their family members once that MIA was repatriated back to their families. Initially, the organization was called the Bent Prop Project, and you can see our initial coin represented right there in the middle of the screen. But it ultimately was a lot of hard work by a lot of individuals that utilized their own time, their own money to fund these missions. And we would execute one mission a year to the nation of Palau for about 4 weeks every year. And we found success executing those missions, and started to become more and more committed to this mission. We were committed to several things, but the primary four were to keep that promise that our nation made to those individuals and their family members, that we would do everything that we could as our way of saying thank you to those that sacrificed the most in returning them to their loved ones. We wanted to provide for those that have given the most for our nation and sacrificed their life. And then also that we found that it was very, very important to keep these stories alive and educate the next generation of the stories of those that gave the most. And as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to contribute to the healing of those individuals, families, and nations, not only America, but the host nation that was war-torn by these impacts of war in the years past. So over the years, our organization has obviously grown, and we started to develop more and more relationships with other people. And about 2012, we developed a relationship with the Scripps Institution of Oceanography and the University of Delaware, and that allowed us to significantly scale our mission. Over the years, we've become more involved with other institutions like San Diego State, Stockbridge High School in Michigan, and have had those students join us on missions. And we've also met students where they're at to share the work of Project Recover. As we've discussed, we're very committed to educating the next generation, and we think it's very, very important to share these stories from years past so that these stories and their sacrifice is not forgotten. In addition to that, we also partner with the Department of Defense. The Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency is the Department of Defense organization that's responsible for the location and accounting for of Americans missing in action and previous prisoners of war. In 2015, they expanded their capacity to establish public-private partnerships, and we were one of the first organizations to work with them, and that's allowed us to not only supplement their work, but also expand our work. Along the way, we've become introduced to all sorts of technologies, and we've had the opportunity to help develop some of these technologies. And some of the most impressive technology has been some of the robots that we've been able to work with, specifically underwater. And one of the ones that we're most excited about working with that really expanded our underwater capability are automated underwater vehicles, which you can see pictured on the left side. And they utilize a number of sensors, but the primary sensor that we use with them is side scanning sonar. And side scanning sonar allows us to use that sonar to map the ocean floor. And instead of using scuba to search the ocean floor, we can use sonar imagery to search for points of interest and then dive those specific points of interest to see if they are MIA sites associated with aircraft and other things. And how that works is the sonar sends out a sound, it's reflected back to the robot, and it creates shadows, kind of like the camels that you see and the shadows cast by the sun in the middle picture. Instead, we get a sonar image, which you see on the right, and that'll show us points of interest. In the lower left corner of that image, you can see something that looks like an airplane, and that's exactly what it is. Most of the time, we're not as lucky to get a beautiful image like this that looks a lot like an airplane or a man-made object. Many times we have to spend hours and hours combing this data to look at things that are points of interest. We'll designate them, and then we'll go back and we'll investigate those sites either with scuba or with other robots, which I'll show you. Those other robots can include ROVs, or remote operated vehicles that are tethered to an operator on a ship or something like that, or a barge. We can take those deep. We can spend a lot of time with those underwater, and we don't have to worry about the risk of having a human underwater or running out of air or anything like that. As I mentioned, we're using side scan sonar and all sorts of other capabilities. I mentioned working with high school students before. Well, high school students, not only are they learning about our mission, but they're also contributing to it. This is one of the first robots created by Stockbridge High School students. They created this remote operated vehicle. They took it to Palau with them. They raised the funds to not only travel to Palau, but also build their robots, and they've contributed to our mission directly. So over the years, we've expanded significantly from some very rudimentary means, traipsing through the jungle and using our eyeballs and machetes and things like that, and using basic scuba to search the ocean floors, to now using some of the most advanced technologies in the world to comb the ocean floor, as well as search the jungles to find those sites associated with missing Americans. And we continue to expand on that capability. Institutions like Scripps Institution of Oceanography and the University of Delaware can use these missions not only as real-world missions and to have an impact on the Gold Star family community and our nation as a whole, but they can use these missions to expand that technology to have impacts in other ways in the world. So I showed you where the nation of Palau was previously. It's designated by that gold star. But since 2012 and our partnership with Scripps and the University of Delaware, we've been able to expand our mission significantly. So now we not only do one mission a year to Palau, we're doing multiple missions a year all over the world. We've worked in the Mediterranean. We've worked right here at home in our own nation, searching for training losses. And we continue to work in the South Pacific as well as other places all over the world. We consistently do research and add to a database. Today, we have a database that includes more than 500 cases associated with more than 3,000 missing Americans. And every year, we'll assess that information to make a determination on which missions we'll execute the following year based on a number of things: information available, resources available, access to that area, and the mission that we need to execute. Today, our mission includes not only research and search, but we conduct research, search missions, both on the land and in the water. We locate sites, document those sites, and now we've further expanded our mission to include the recovery of remains in partnership with DPAA. The only thing that we do not do in the process of repatriating a missing American is the identification process, which is done in a lab either in Nebraska or Hawaii by the Department of Defense, and that's restricted to that those two sites based on Title 10 restrictions. So what's next? Well, we continue to grow our technology and our capability. We're using a variety of drones, one of which you can see in the picture on the right, aerial drones, which we used recently on a mission in Italy, carrying sensors below it that can scan the land or the water below it for things of interest. I told you we've expanded our mission to include recovery. We continue to expand that technology to include things like machine learning. But our biggest asset, of course, is our members. Our members come with a rich variety of backgrounds and a variety of expertise. And anytime we find somebody that's interested in our mission, we explore how they can contribute to our mission and further expand it. And many times we're surprised and we welcome those contributions. I've said several times already, we are very interested in education, and we continue to work with students. One of the things I'm most proud of in the picture with the students on the screen is that was an all-female high school engineering team that was part of that Stockbridge High School that I mentioned earlier, and they continue to contribute to our mission, and that's something that we're very proud of. Not only sharing this information and history with them, but their ability to give back in their own way and provide to our mission. So a couple of stories I'd like to share with you about our mission. You saw this picture earlier, and I used it as a demonstration to show just how dirty and worn out we get in the jungle, but there's a little bit more to that. This is Casey Doyle, and Casey Doyle is an active duty Marine, but he's also the grandson of Jimmy Doyle. And Jimmy Doyle was a B-24 aviator. And in 2004, Project Recover located his grandfather's B-24 in a lagoon in Palau. Him and 8 other crewmen went down with that aircraft. And through the recovery missions, all 8 of those aircrew were repatriated back to the United States, culminating in a ceremony in 2010 in Arlington National Cemetery. And Casey took it upon himself to examine our mission and really figure out, how do you give back to somebody that's given this to your family? And he figured the best way to do that was to participate. And now Casey is a full-time member of our organization, and he's not the only Gold Star family member that we have in our group. We have at least 2 others that are contributing to our missions on a regular basis, and we're proud to have them within our ranks. I showed you this slide of the side scanning sonar earlier. Well, this was a real mission, and this was an aircraft that we located. The unique thing about this aircraft is it wasn't an American aircraft. Our primary mission is to search for Americans missing in action from our previous wars, but obviously these battle sites included not only Americans, but those that we were fighting with. And in this case, this was a Japanese aircraft, pictured right there. This is a Japanese norm. And when we located this aircraft on the ocean floor, it was something really unique to us. It had these counter-rotating props, and we really didn't know what it was. It had a spooky black coral growing off of it. And after doing a lot of research, what we realized was it was a Japanese norm. And at the time, we believed that this was the only Japanese norm in existence. There was 9 of them that were made operational. They were all destroyed in World War II. And we found this one sitting nicely on the ocean floor in Palau. When we found it, it still had the machine gun in the back where the aviator was sitting. This crew survived this incident, but we were very proud to find this, and the aviation enthusiasts were really interested in it. Now, I mentioned that at the time, this was the only Japanese norm that we found. Since then, we've actually found a second Japanese norm in Chuuk Lagoon in the island of Chuuk. And we believe that those are the only two in existence or that we are aware of. In the history of UDTs and the Navy SEALs, there's only 3 UDT members that have been lost that have not been recovered. And this is part of a group that we're looking for. Those 3 UDT members were actually lost on the island of Yap, transported to Palau, were prisoners of war, and ultimately executed. And part of our mission is to include these POWs and their execution in internment sites. And we're actively searching for the internment sites of these Navy SEALs. So this is a lot of hard work, and we spent a lot of time searching for these sites, but there's many stories that really drive home, who it is that we're looking for. We keep track of the names of the MIAs that we're looking for. We build relationships with them, even though we don't have any connection with them directly. But many times you find these sites and there's pieces that really drive home the human piece that you're looking for in an actual person. The name of our organization was originally the Bent Prop Project because every time we found an aircraft site, there was a bent propeller. And that was the piece that was driving that aircraft through the air before it was ultimately lost. And it was always something to walk up or swim up and touch that propeller. And I think every single member of our team would do it whenever we would find a site. And other things like if you find a piece of aluminum in the jungle, many times the years have worn away the paint and it's just a shiny piece of aluminum. And then when you tip it over, you'll see the blue paint that represents America on it. And one of the pieces that always gets to me is this spoon. This is an Avenger site that Project Recover found in 2006. And in the wreckage was the spoon. And as you can see, it carved into it is USN for United States Navy. And as a former service member who used to carry a spoon in my pocket, that really hits home for me. I think about that aviator, maybe just was in the galley before this mission or thinking about getting back to the galley after the mission. And unfortunately, he didn't make it back. Part of that crew was Paul Binsman, and he's featured on this newspaper article that you can see in the center of the screen. When they did the recovery for this site, unfortunately, they didn't locate any remains, but they did find Paul Binsman's dog tag, which is sitting right on the top of that newspaper. And that was repatriated back to his family. And we were able to join the Binsman family and the community of Alton, Illinois, in a memorial and a celebration of Paul Binsman's life and sacrifice for our nation. But even though we weren't able to find Paul Binsman's remains, that dog tag allowed that family to have some sort of answers and move forward with some sort of healing and closure. And it's something that we're very, very proud of. But ultimately, these are humans that we're looking for. We're not the aircraft that we're looking for. The aircraft are just a means to find those that are missing and ultimately get them home. I mentioned the commitment of host nations to our work, and I share this article with you because this is not a newspaper from the United States. This is actually a newspaper from Palau, and the Palauans are very invested in our mission. When we first started doing work in Palau, they were kind of curious as to why we were diving in some of the most dirty spots and not the tourist spots. We weren't going to the places that other people went. And once they found out exactly what we were doing, that we weren't looking for treasure or anything like that, they became very invested in our mission. They believe that when somebody dies, that they return to the island of their mother. And so they could connect very directly with our mission. And plus, they believe that the sacrifices made by American service members during World War II is why they have their nation back. And so they were very, very supportive. And when we've found sites in the past, they protect those sites until a recovery can occur. And when remains are repatriated back to the United States, they become very much interested in what happens to those remains. Typically, when they are returned to the United States, either Hawaii or Nebraska or wherever they're transported to, a ramp ceremony occurs when they make it back on U.S. soil. But because the Palauans are so invested in our mission and the return of these missing Americans, they demanded all the way from the president down that a ramp ceremony occur on the soil in Palau before they left so that they could show their proper respect. So this ramp ceremony that you see depicted in this picture is actually in Palau. They were recognizing the sacrifice made by this aviator before he returned home and was repatriated back to his loved ones. That brings us back to Ora Sharning House. Walter Mintus, and William Pinnell. And in actuality, that picture that you saw previously was William Pinnell when he was being repatriated back to the United States. And all of these stories have come to a conclusion. Success to us are these pictures. Somebody being interned at home on our soil, whether it's Arlington National Cemetery as depicted in the top picture, or Portage, Pennsylvania, or other places around the nation. Having that flag delivered to the sister of that loved one, or seeing children and others in our nation lining the streets, not only to memorialize but celebrate the sacrifice made by these men and women that gave the ultimate sacrifice for our nation. One thing special about the MIA story is we know the freedoms that we live because of their sacrifice, but decades later when they return home, there's a second wave of impact that happens in these communities through these memorials and celebrations. Communities come together and acknowledge the sacrifice made, and healing gets to occur in these communities. And as I mentioned, as a nation, that promise is kept. Those families can have true answers to the questions that they've held on to for so many years, and they're allowed to move forward many times in a better way. And that's something that we're very, very proud to contribute to. So to date, Project Recover has executed more than 60 missions. We've worked in more than 20 countries around the world, found more than 50 aircraft or other sites associated with missing Americans. Those included more than 200 Americans. Of those cases, about 70 from the USS Abner Reed have been designated lost at sea. 15 have been repatriated, and more than 100 are open cases awaiting recovery or in some sort of stage of identification, and others. So those numbers will continue to grow. Recently, a documentary was released on Project Recover titled To What Remains. It's in some theaters around the country and in showing special locations. And in March or April, it'll be available for streaming. And it's a beautiful piece, a full-length documentary that was done on our work. And it follows several stories from the search process, location, identification, and ultimately repatriation. And they do an incredible job of highlighting the impact that this work has on Gold Star MIA families. And it's something that we're very proud of. And if you reach out to projectrecover.org and you're interested in having that in your community or seeing it, we can help you find locations associated with it. So what can you do to help keep America's promise? But really, it's a matter of telling stories. Many people want to contribute to our mission, and we encourage you to reach out to us if this is a mission that you want to be a part of. But maybe you have somebody in your family that's missing. And if that's the case, we want to hear from you. You might have that one piece of information that we need to help us find and locate that missing American. And if you can contribute to our mission in any way, we truly believe that this is every American's mission, not just our mission or my mission or a single person's mission. It's every American's mission as part of that collective promise that we make to those missing Americans. To find out more about our organization, we encourage you to visit our website, projectrecover.org. And of course, we can be found on any of the social media platforms. We encourage you to follow us, engage with us. We want to hear from you, and we enjoy engaging with our supporters. With that, I want to open this up to any questions. Pat and I are open and willing and look forward to answering those for you.